we can do that together through these conferences. I wanted to recognize our April, like my cousins, who've been feeding us as well, and to our, I think, to our many volunteers that are helping you guys in the work, your workshops, and above all of you that have come to the city of Nanaimo and the territory of Nanaimo. So with that, have a great day, and friendly.
Hey, Dana, thank you for opening us today. I'm really excited to be back for the second day of the conference. Thank you all for returning. I think we had a really amazing day yesterday. Looking forward to another amazing day with lots of speakers. First up, we have Richard Peter. So Richard is a member of Cowichan Tribes, which is one of Canada's most accomplished ghost basketball players in history. A member of the country's dominant squad that won 3 Paralympic gold medals in 2000 and 2012, and his influence has headed far beyond. He is known as generous and energetic across the Paris Paralympic Canada, and is actively encouraged other people to get involved in Paris art, including Indigenous people with a disability. He is an ambassador for Peace and Friendship Association's Indigenous Bridging the Gap program, and he has volunteered his time for many Paris causes, including at the Paralympic Foundation of Canada 2 ParaTough Cup events in Vancouver in 2018 and 2019. He also recently was a part of a group of para-athletes who helped map the accessibility of trails across Canada in partnership with CPUC, Trans Canada Trail, and AccessNow. Peter helped many Stanley Park in Vancouver with the goal of making trails more accessible to all. Now at age 48, Peter also currently works for Praxis Spinal Cord Institute, which focuses on spinal cord research, innovation, and care. He has diligently worked behind the scenes with spinal cord research for many years, really helping the lives of other Indigenous people with spinal cord injury. So very excited to have Richard Peter here. A big welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I think I turned it on. Good. Good to go. Communications all set. That's why we come early. Thanks for the great welcome. First, I want to say, thanks for inviting me to Nanaimo to come to your guys' territory and come speak. Also, thanks to IPAC for inviting me, Rosalind for coming out. It's always a privilege to come out and share a bit of the stories. Yesterday was a great day. I'm glad to come out and check everything on out. My hands up to all the speakers and presenters from yesterday. I learned a lot also. That's what I always love about it too. It's always funny for me to hear more of what's going on. For me, I always have trouble coming out and talking about myself because I just do everything like everybody here. I do it because I love it. I know that's what everybody's here to do also. But I just happen to enjoy it at the highest level, like a few other speakers from yesterday. So we'll see how well this slideshow works for me. Did it work? There we go. So there's a bit of my info. Gee, I don't know what I got written up there. So obviously I wrote Bear on top, so that's my nickname. And that's actually pretty funny that I actually got that through sport. So it's something that I got on that level. To tell a bit more about myself, I actually got injured, as it says, in '77. So I've been in a chair for many years. Also, I'm originally from the island, Dano, who did the welcome. Dano's my relation from Cowichan. So I'm originally from Cowichan Tribes, just up the road. But I currently live in Vancouver right now. Mainly, I went to Vancouver to start pursuing my parasports career. It was definitely a lot of fun. But sometimes I really wish I actually had my parents here, my mom, because she was actually the one that really helped me succeed. As I mentioned, so in Duncan in '77, when we talk about adaptive sports, adaptive programs, how accessible schools are, that's a different story back then than it is today. So my hat's off to my mom, who, when I got injured, actually I was, designated, sorry, well, you can now go into the special needs program. But my mom was like, well, no, his legs don't work, but his heart, his mind, his voice still work. He can go to public school. And I'm very thankful that she did. It was definitely a big battle, every year, whether it was elementary to middle school to high school. It was definitely a lot of challenges. So usually the first month or first week, the school was busy doing adaptations to make sure that the school was adaptable and accessible for me. And so that was definitely a lot of fun. And then that's what I always talk about now too, with schools and with all the teachers, that actually a lot of them were leaders too, that they opened up their arms too, to include all the different programs, especially I can easily say with phys ed, that they adapted any of the programs that they worked with. That's all right. Well, Richard's here, let's adapt it for him too. So that's always been a joy. So there's only a few of us. There was actually only two guys that had disabilities in Duncan at that time. One guy was in a power chair, and then there was me. So there wasn't a whole lot of programs. Or also, nowadays it's different with our cell phones, internet. We can find out so much more information about parasports and disability sports. But back then, I'd never heard about it. The only time I actually did hear about it was that one guy that was wheeling around, Rick Hansen. And so once, that's the first time that I really heard about anything. But luckily somebody through school heard about parasports and said, oh, there's a program in Victoria. They have a demonstration team that comes to a school and helps introduce parasports. So at first I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. I grew up, I had a very large family on both my mom's and dad's side, probably like a few members here, that both of my mom's and dad's side, I actually had 12 uncles and aunts on both sides. So I had a very large family and a lot of support. That was the biggest thing. So even with all my family growing up, all my cousins, that same thing, we adapted sports every day. That if we're going out and playing baseball, right, I would be the pitcher or the catcher. I work on first base, and if we played football, then I'd be the quarterback. So I wouldn't have to be running and jumping and so on. And so we adapted a lot of our programs back then and just had a lot of fun. So when somebody said, oh, Richard, come out and try wheelchair sports, I was actually, no, that's not for me. I didn't really care for that. I'm like, oh, I'm having fun doing what I'm doing. Just like some of the speakers, you're back in your community and you're doing whatever programs that you can. Having fun. And that's the biggest thing. I just said, all right, we're having fun. I'm okay where I am. And actually the school did a really good job. It was actually, the organizer was a very cute girl that came up and said, Richard, come join us. And I was like, okay. so that was pretty hilarious on how I said, oh, sure, I'll give it a try. So that was, I think I was about 14 or 15 years old when I first started wheelchair sports, and I was hooked ever since. I tried every single sport that's possible. Nowadays, technology is way different, that every sport, every activity can be adapted. And that's where it's great with who I work with Praxis, and working with new companies and learning about new technologies that can make everything that much more accessible. Let's see, so there's a bit of the current work. Yes, I'm known for wheelchair basketball, that I played on the national team for 20 years. So my first set of games was actually, I joined the Olympics or Paralympics in '96. So that's when we were in Atlanta. And I got very lucky to have such a long career. So yeah, I went to '96 in Atlanta, 2000 was Australia, 2004 was Athens, 2008 was China, and I retired in 2012 in London. And so our team did really well, as spoken with the speaker that introduced me. Yeah, Canada has done really well. I've won 3 gold medals and 1 silver. And so that's been a great joy for me, because when I first started, I just did it because I love sports, and I'd never really thought I'd be able to represent Canada and achieve, the highest level possible. So it's been a great joy. I always say there's always been a bit of challenges. Out of those 20 years, I was the only Indigenous athlete that was on the team throughout that whole time. So that's definitely been a few ups and downs, a few roadblocks here and there. And even I'd say, same thing. I go back to my family, that I pretty well owe my career to my grandfather, who's passed away a few years ago. And one of my first set of games, I went to Vancouver, went over to a tournament, and then had sort of my first major taste of racism. And I was like, all right, well, hold on. I was playing basketball and then had that on the court. And so that really set me back, and I still played and then came back home and just chatted with my grandfather. I'd always do that pretty well every day. I'd go see my grandfather in the garden and chat about stuff. And I was like, oh, you just went on a basketball tournament. How was it? And then that's when he saw that I sort of, went down. I said, oh, it was okay. It was fun, but I don't think this is for me. I don't think the sport's for me. And he put it great. He's like, okay, well, oh, what happened? And I said, oh, there was a bit of racism, and yeah, I don't think I'm not going to do this anymore. And he put it great. He's like, okay, that's, I respect your decision. That's what you can do. But he's like, sorry about that. But did you enjoy sport? And that's when I perked up. I was like, I love basketball. It was the best thing that I've ever done. I enjoyed it immensely. I had so much fun. And then he's like, all right, do you want that one person to take that sport away from you? And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so I was very, like I said, I owe it to my grandfather that said, all right, yeah, don't let that person take that away from me. And so that's what I've always had, that little chip on my shoulder since then. And said, all right, no, I'm going to do this, because I love it. And that's where I know I'm always out there trying to help. I say any new athletes that are coming around, or who, not even just sports, but just to get on with life. To say, right, yeah, this is the path that I went on, and hopefully we can make it a much easier and a smoother path for anybody else that's following. So that's why I sort of got into a bit more research. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. I guess I should have went through the slides first. So yeah, that's about me. Even I can talk about technology with that photo. I think that was one of my uncle's weddings, and he said, all right, here, you're going to be the ring bearer. And so that's why I'm dressed up very nice there. But even, it's too bad we couldn't show that wheelchair. So that's the chair that I had back then, which, oh, that's still on. Hopefully we're still good. Even I can talk about that chair just with technology. So that's an old, I would say an old hospital chair, which I'm sure you do see here and there. So that chair probably weighed about 40 pounds. I think it was made of steel. And so pushing that around, and I always say that actually helped me become a stronger athlete. So the chair that I'm in now probably weighs maybe even a third of that, less than half of that chair. So this chair weighs technically under 15 pounds. And so that way makes everything that much easier, especially as I'm getting older, makes it easier to wheel. So that's just technology, and that's where I love working with my new job. Here's a few of the sports that I've done. So actually, the photo on the bottom was athletics. Actually, yeah, most people don't know that was my first sport. I tried athletics. Actually, I was the national junior champion for Canada, but I enjoyed it. But I thought team sports was more my gig. And so I was like, all right, I enjoyed it, but let's try some other sports. And that's where I got into basketball. That's basketball on the left-hand corner. And so that's me many pounds ago. I'm sure we all can say that. So I think that was actually a BC Winter Games in Cowichan, that picture there. And so I was able to play, and so it's great to come back to the community. And so like everybody else, especially with any of the athletes, couldn't have done it without all the support from back home. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Like I always go back to, my family and even my mom. So when I got injured, I went to Vancouver to go to rehab. And so my parents came over to help learn more about what's going on. And it's the same thing. Then my mom came back to help educate everybody else back home, the rest of the family. And so that's always been a joy. I always say I should have her up here with me talking, but she would never say yes. And then actually currently the other photo, badminton, which is sort of hard to see on what side are you? Your right side. The right-hand photo, it's para badminton. And with one of my other jobs, I helped introduce sport to other new members. And so somebody was trying to get badminton involved in Canada. And I'm like, sure, I'll help out. I'll get some athletes to come out, try. And so I gave it a try also. And then I ended up becoming the Canadian champion also in para badminton. So currently I do represent Canada with badminton right now, but I keep telling them I'm too old for this stuff. I think it's time I'll retire again soon from there. I always have fun. I just threw that photo in, but I always love to have fun on the court and introduce sport. Like I mentioned with Indigenous Bridging the Gap, let's see if that's got the next one. We'll go back to it. With Indigenous Bridging the Gap, which is one of the programs. So that's out of BC Wheelchair Sports and also with wheelchair basketball. And it's a program that comes in to communities, whether it's here. Actually, that's what I just did just before this. I was up in Haida Gwaii, and so we went up there with the Indigenous Bridging the Gap program. So we grabbed 25 wheelchairs. We went to all the schools that were on the island and introduced wheelchair sports. And not just wheelchair basketball, it's not even organized sport. It's just get out and have fun, because we have programs for any age from 5, 6 years old up to any age. But like one program which is called Let's Play is specifically for age 6 to about 14 or 15, and it's a free program. So if you have anybody that has a disability, they will give you a chair to use till you outgrow it. And one of the big benefits out of that program is it's a free program. So each of that chair, actually, yeah, now we'll get into costs. My sports chairs, with all the sports that I had earlier, I should have talked about that earlier, that each chair, I had to have a different sports chair for each program. And that's where it gets to a bit of a financial problem, because each of those chairs, that chair right there, I think that costs about $10,000. So each chair, I would say on average between $5,000 to $10,000. I think my badminton chair was about 12. This chair that I'm into, I think it cost about $12,000 or $13,000. So it gets expensive. And then within medical costs are expensive. And so that's one thing that we try to have. So with all the sport programs that I work with, whether it's wheelchair sports or wheelchair basketball, Let's Play, they have a loan program. They make those chairs accessible. I mean, I did not have the financial means, or my family, when I was growing up. So we had to get a lot of support from the programs to make those chairs and sports available. So everything that I had was either donated or a loan program. You can either loan it for $100 a year, but even if you couldn't afford that, they would say, all right, waive that fee, and then you could utilize the chair and the equipment free until you outgrew it. And again, that's what I was talking about with earlier with it was always a joy for me to represent Canada as some of the speakers, but also it was a huge joy for me to represent my community, my family, and Cowichan Tribes and Indigenous people in general. So that's always been a great joy for me. That's why I always carry this around. So this is coming from Cowichan. We always have Cowichan knit stuff. So I've got a few sweaters, but then this is sort of actually was a gift bag, but I use it for my medals. So that's where I always keep it together, that I'll keep my represent Canada, but then also represent my community together. I always try to share a bit of my history and my background with other countries, even my teammates. So educate there. So this is, I'll show you, I'll hand this around, everybody can check it out too. So this is my last medal that I got in London, 2012. So that's when I retired. I'm sure everybody knows more of the Olympics, which are the Olympic 5 rings. And so right here, the logo right above it is, I call it 3 Nike swooshes, which I'm not allowed to say legally, but that's our Paralympic logo. And so that's the logo for the Paralympic Games. And so that's one thing that really does show up. When I hand it out, you can actually feel there's a few bumps there around the medal, and that's Braille, because we have a lot of different athletes with different disabilities, and so that's for the blind athletes. So here, I'll hand this out and then we can check. Yeah, to let you know, there's no chocolate inside, so nobody test that. And so that's one of the biggest things that I love to do. I love to come out and share it. I wish I could share it more. One bad thing too is I don't even recall what, I'll say about 10, 12 years ago, we actually got broken into and lost a few of our medals. And so that was definitely unfortunate. Actually, I lost more Canada jerseys and clothing with it too. And so that was a bit of a hard thing, but now that's where I do see it differently too. And I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't necessarily mean as much. It's still just more of the enjoyment. Like people will ask, all right, what was the biggest accomplishment that I really enjoyed? And I would actually say, yeah, the medal, winning a medal is awesome. But I'd say going into the opening ceremonies. that was one of the biggest things that I really enjoyed with any games, whether it's NAID, BC Winter Games, you know, any major activity, sport program. That's one of the biggest things, because everybody's there to have a good time. Everybody's there to do their best, and to, like, I think that's what I've loved about it. So whenever I did go on a trip, again, one of my other grandmothers, my grandparents, she would come back, and she always sort of brought it back into context for me too. I'd come back and she's like, "Oh, Richard, how was it? How was your trip? What did you go see?" And so that was one of the biggest things, that once I went traveling, I was able to come back and share all of my experiences with my family. And that's always one of the biggest things that I've really enjoyed. It's $5 a photo if you take a photo. So that's one of the biggest things with diversity. I mean, I just love sharing my culture with, you know, trying to educate a little bit, you know, just with the rest of my team. I'm even culturally, like, it's surprising now. I did a few talks after I retired with my coaches and the rest of my team. And of course, with residential school finance, so there's always a bit more education. So I gave a bit more educating with my work and some of my sport. And my old coach was on one of those talks, and I talked about, you know, we have different sponsors for our programs, and we're sponsored by Hudson's Bay Company. And I said, I was a little iffy with Hudson's Bay, and I said, if they give it, like, they give every athlete a bag full of stuff, some shirts, some jackets, hats, runners, whatever. And I was like, you know, I was like, oh, that's good, but if I'm getting a blanket, I'm not going to take the blanket. But at that time, I wasn't as vocal or as strong as myself, so I kept that to myself. And so when I told that to the sport programs that I was chatting with, my head coach, previous head coach, was on that, and he's like, "Wow, Richard, I feel really bad. I never knew that," and he never thought of it. And like I did say, most of the time, I was the only Indigenous athlete that was on the team, so sometimes you're very isolated. I mean, I was still part of the team, but there's still, I had troubles with, if there was some, let's say some event like this, or an event that was back home in my community, it was very difficult for me to be away from my family. I'm like, oh, I was very torn, but I had a lot of support on both sides. I would then call home to my mom and say, all right, should I be coming home right now? She's like, nope. The family, everybody knows you're on your journey, and everybody respects that. And so with that support, that really helped me to get that from my home community, my family. And then same thing with sport. If I didn't have a funeral or something very big, they're like, no, Richard, your community, your culture is very important to us too. You can go off and miss a few things. And so that was definitely a lot of challenge and a little bit of juggling, as any athlete will talk about what you have to work with. There's some more with badminton. So that, yeah, just started that. I think that was in Winnipeg that we're playing. And so again, another new sport, another new wheelchair, but definitely, I think that's what I just enjoy about my job and my work. I could say I have a few different hats that I wear. So one of the jobs, maybe that's what I'll talk about now, or let's see if that's the next photo. No. I'll go to that one photo too. So with a few of the different hats that I wear, you know, one of the jobs we talked about was Praxis when I was introduced. Praxis was the old Rick Hansen Spinal Cord Institute. And so just working on improving lives with people with spinal cord injury. And so I worked with another group at that time with Spinal Cord Injury BC. And so they're a peer program. So I used to work at GF Strong, which is the Spinal Cord Injury Rehab Center in Vancouver. So I worked with all new clients that were coming through. And one of the big things was just, I always say I was a good middleman, that I could point people in the right direction of different services to access. And so the Praxis, my coworker now, he came to GF Strong and did his research talk and came out and said, all right, here guys, this is what's going on. And I was actually, so I'd heard it many times before, but I thought I'd test him this one day. And I said, oh, John, what do you do in regards towards the Indigenous population? What do you do on reserve? What do you do off reserve? And actually, that was the first time I'd ever seen him stumped. He's like, oh, I've got no reply. And so he went back to work and said, hey, I just got asked a question of what can be done. And so that's where they came back the following year and said, Richard, we want you to come work for us to help bridge that gap again. And so that's where it's been a big challenge for me and enjoyment. Because even though I say I work there, but I will always say I'm not a researcher. But I know with my other work that being Indigenous with an SCI and just living for the last 40 years with a disability, I know a lot about all the different changes that are happening, and so all the different challenges. And so that's one of the big things. Even our trip to Haida Gwaii, the big part of it too was we know a few clients that had spinal cord injuries that were living there also, and so that was great to get up there and introduce them and talk about a few more programs that can help out. And so that's one of the big things is I just want to help improve lives. Like I said, I knew my journey, some of the challenges. It would be great to have my mom here to talk about some of those challenges that she experienced too. And that's one of the big things. All right, let's try to make that path a little bit smoother. Actually, the player that I'm with is Jamie Borisoff, Dr. Jamie Borisoff. He works at, what is his title? He's at BCIT. So he's a great guy. He's actually done a lot of innovation. He designed the wheelchairs that we're in right now, that you can see. And it's pretty neat that he started working in the lab and he had the problem, all right, I can't sit up to the table, the lab. I need something that helps out. And so he designed the chair that there was a lift. He would flick a switch under his chair and it would stand him up. We should have been standing there. I'm surprised we're not. But that was in Athens that we won the medals there. And so me and him were both from Vancouver. And so that's where we got that photo together. And so I do now work with him a lot more, and we're, outside of sport, that we're still working together on those lines. That's the royal family that was coming for 2010. That was a lead up to the 2010 games. And so they came and we did a sport demonstration out at City Hall in Vancouver. And so it was great to get them to get out. And so I just loved, I always say, coming full circle. I got a lot of help to get me to where I am here today. And I want to try to give back to all those communities. And so I do a lot with all the wheel para sports programs. And so we're helping, we got our youth that are there and help introduce wheelchair basketball to the community. And I will always try to tie in my culture with me. So with the 2010 games, if you remember the torch relay that happened all across Canada. So I got lucky that I could come back to Cowichan and do a torch relay in Duncan. And so of course I'm like, well, let's get the family out there. And so that's the NIPAW dancers that are behind me. And so we did a photo, but they helped lead me into the stadium to go do the torch relay there in Cowichan. I got really lucky actually because I was actually living in Germany. So sport has opened up so many doors. I think I always forget about that. Sport has opened up so many doors for me. It's crazy that I lived in Germany for a couple of years, Italy, of course, down in the States playing semi-professional. I say semi-professional because I didn't get paid that much, but it was enough that I enjoyed it. Through the end of my career, I was like, oh, let's go live in Europe for a bit and let's go over there and enjoy it. And that's one of the big things. So I was actually living in Germany at the time, and they gave me time off to come back to Cowichan and be part of the torch relay. This is pretty hilarious. This is actually this is my birthday. That's when I turned 40 and when I retired. So this was in London, and you can't see it, but so we're in the athletes village. So there's the athletes village, and then there's the game site where all the public can go, where they want to go and check out all the games. So I'm there visiting some family, and I knew not to wear any Canada gear because when you wear team gear, then that's when you get sort of mobbed. And we're just cruising. This is the day after we just won, and so this is the final day. And I was just cruising through, and I asked a security guard. I was like, "Oh, where can I go get something to eat?" I was looking for this, and he's like, "Oh, it's right over there." And he's like, "Hey, I just watched you play last night. Did you win a medal last night? I watched you play basketball." I was like, "Oh, yes, I was." And so I showed it just like now. I said, "Oh yeah, here it is. Let's take a quick photo." And that was the worst thing. So it's just like that's probably 10 seconds after I showed him the medal, and then we got mobbed. And so that was pretty wild to have. And so it's always great. Like I said, I'm happy to try to share it with as many people as possible. That was difficult. I would just sit there, turn and smile. And so I was like, "All right, guys, sorry, I've got to end this." And so I put it away and said, "No, sorry, I got to go. I'm hungry. I got to go eat." And so that was one of the big things that we were able to share. And that's what I do now. Like with all the programs, bridging the gap. I love going to schools, love going to different communities and introduce sport to somebody else. Like I got very lucky the way I was introduced and kept me going. Same thing, like so. It's always funny. So this is actually a BC Sports Hall of Fame table. And so I got inducted into the BC Sports Hall of Fame in actually 2010 also. And so that's pretty wild to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, but also they have the Indigenous Hall of Fame also. And so that's always great to be part of that also. And that's a tremendous honor for me. So this was actually at the P&E. They had a booth up and we were just cruising through the P&E one day. I was like, oh, let me take a photo in front of the booth. And so it's always still great too. I do talks with the BC Sports Hall of Fame. Actually, yeah, to tie back in, after we got broken into, so I donated all the medals and stuff that I did have. I donated to the Hall of Fame so that they have it in a bit more secure location. So that was very lucky for us that the rest of my stuff is down there that we still do have. And then, yeah, so actually I have no idea what time it is, but yeah, I think that's, oh, well, perfect timing. Yeah, perfect timing. So through that, I mean, I always don't just talk about sports. People will always say, oh, you just love talking about basketball. I was like, no, I always just talk about life. With the job when I worked at GF Strong, the rehab center, that was the biggest thing. I rarely talk about sports, but I'm like, all right, what do you want to do next? Like the client that we had up in Haida Gwaii, he used to work with forestry. And so that's tough for him to get back into that area. But I was like, all right, now let's find different areas that you might be interested, even just talk about accessibility. So that was hard too, that up there, we found some accommodations, but it wasn't fully accessible. And so that's one big thing too, that we're always working on. And so I said, well, how about you start working in that different area? And so there's always different opportunities that you still can hopefully go through. And so it's always more life. He got injured about 4 years ago. And that's sort of what I always say, that he got injured, then he goes back home and then has to try to learn how to do everything all over again. I should have had another photo when I was younger to learn how to use the chair, even like doing a quick little pop wheelie. So I know it's hard to see online, but so I'm balancing on 2 wheels and it looks like a cool little trick. I can't jump up and kick as high as you can, but I can. And even though this does look like a little trick to do a pop wheelie, but it's a skill. Like if there's no ramp, I have to learn how to jump over a curb, even just jump over this cord that's down. So it's a skill that you have to learn. And so that's one of the big things that I'm always trying to teach different things. I mean, I drove here on my own. I don't use my legs, but I have hand controls that I drive with my hands. And so there's always innovation and technology has changed from when I first got hurt in the 70s to what it is nowadays. And so that's where I'm glad to come share all that stories with you guys today, and even with my new work to try to help introduce a lot more opportunity to everybody else. But I just want to say thanks for listening to me. I know I can just sit here and babble and babble and babble, but I'm glad I could come out and share, and hopefully you guys get to enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll be here enjoying it with you guys too. Thanks again.
Could you please provide a full certificate for that?
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you later.
Thanks so much, Richard. We'll be keeping an eye on that medal going around. Make sure that was a signature. No way. Next up, we're excited to welcome Steve Randy Erminskin and Dr. Walton. So, Randy